Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing this with others. Thanks for reaching out and making comments to me on it. It's always interesting to run into somebody who has listened to a particular episode and will make a remark about something that was said or something a guest said, or just whether they're moved by it or just amused by it or whatever it is. It's nice to know that somebody's listening. At any rate, I think we're all a fan of commercials. I mean, you might say, no, I don't like commercials. And for the most part, I don't like the interruptions with programming for sure. But there are certain commercials that they kind of get you, right? I mean, they're kind of entertaining. So I'm not necessarily, let's speak for myself. I'm not necessarily a fan of all commercials. I'm certainly a fan of ones that, good commercials. I'm a fan of good commercials. The Super Bowl, has some good commercials. I think people put in a lot of effort, and so good things come from that. Sometimes people try too hard, and it's not funny or not amusing enough. But there are a lot of neat ones out there. If you're a fan of commercials, and I know there are people out there, certainly in advertising, they're fans of commercials. They kind of stop and watch and see what people are doing. But in 1984, there was a commercial that came out, and it showed a trio of elderly women, kind of a bare background. It was very sterile, all white. There's a white table, if I recall, or a white countertop, and they were examining a skimpy fast food hamburger. They had the bun off the top, and at one point, one of the women, the eldest of the women, if I recall, she cries out, "Where's the beef?" And that was really a very iconic commercial. It was a commercial for Wendy's hamburgers, which is either the second or third largest hamburger chain in the United States, behind number one, McDonald's. The other second or third would probably be Burger King. I don't know where they all rank out at this point. McDonald's is definitely number one. But it instantly became their slogan and is still really associated with Wendy's hamburgers. In fact, "Where's the beef?" has kind of become a catchphrase for under-delivering. When something, somebody's not getting what they bargained for, to say "where's the beef" is, essentially an homage to that particular commercial. But I find it interesting. I find that commercial interesting just because Wendy's Hamburgers here is headquartered here in Columbus, Ohio. A lot of people don't know that. Columbus is headquartered to a lot of brands. I won't, this is not a travelogue for Columbus, Ohio. But Wendy's Hamburgers is here, and the founder, R. David Thomas, the first restaurant was here. He had located here, and when I was in graduate school, when I was in graduate business school, finishing up my MBA, he spoke at our graduation. Now, the graduation was not, it was more of a graduation ceremony. I think there were like 100 of us that went through the MBA program. That particular year was 1987 that I got my MBA. And so it was more a ceremony than anything. We didn't have caps and gowns, and we didn't walk and didn't get diplomas. All that was done at the main graduation for the Ohio State University. But R. David Thomas came in and he did a presentation or did a talk to us. And it was interesting because, and I didn't know it at the time, but R. David Thomas was a high school dropout. And when he spoke to us, it was highly unimpressive. Just in the sense that his English was horrible, meaning his grammar was horrible. Are and is, was and were totally interchangeable. I were instead of I was, or whatever. And it's neither here nor there. I guess that was probably my first lesson, to be honest. That being in business school was more about getting a job working for an iconic entrepreneur than actually being an iconic entrepreneur. You don't need to have a college degree to be an entrepreneur, and our David Thomas is probably living proof of that. And there's lots of stories like that. Bill Gates, I don't think, finished school. Mark Zuckerberg didn't finish school. There's lots that goes into being an entrepreneur at all. I'm struggling with that word today. So that was kind of a lesson that was there, but it really kind of made me interested in our David Thomas's story. And, because he was a high school dropout, he was probably best suited to just be a fast food worker as opposed to a fast food tycoon, which is what he ended up being. But he did start out as a fast food worker. He started out with Kentucky Fried Chicken and spent years working with Kentucky Fried Chicken and working his way up in Kentucky Fried Chicken, and actually, I believe, owning franchises there. I think he was one of the initial people in Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips, that particular chain, if you're familiar with it. I don't know that it's around so much anymore. But he when he got on this notion of, hey, listen, I'm going to start this hamburger chain. He saw a place in the market for a true hamburger, a fresh hamburger, not a frozen hamburger, a hamburger that had lots of beef, and he started to pull together this thing. He executed on what I call a great networking strategy. And rather than beating down the doors for new connections to get things started, what he did was he tapped into the ones that he'd made over the years working at KFC. He'd worked with a lot of people at KFC, people who were very successful. He certainly knew of people here in Columbus, Ohio as well, but he tapped into these old connections. And this is all kind of a tie-in to the "Where's the Beef" slogan, because where's the beef in your network is really, it's not the new people. It's not the new people out there that you need to come across. It's really all the people you already know. And that's really the lesson I've taken away from kind of looking into our David Thomas's story. And there's a whole lot of layers to his story. It's more than just that. I mean, he was adopted, and he puts a lot of support into adoption charities. Now, he has since passed, but his foundation, his family, is still very supportive of that. Wendy's his name. Wendy, the name Wendy's came from his youngest daughter, Wendy, who looks like the little girl. Well, not anymore, but looked like the little girl who was on the sign, or is on the sign. Total aside. But just the whole notion of when you're starting something, when you're starting a new venture, when you're really trying to ramp up the venture that you already have, whatever it might be, a new product, a new twist, whatever. The conventional wisdom is you know what, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to start making new contacts. I know for me, when I left public accounting, I was a tax consultant. If you listen to episode 000, the very first episode, I kind of run down my whole history, so I won't go through the whole thing here. But part of what I was doing is I'm just going to race around and I'm going to try and tap into, going to trade shows or chamber things or wherever there was a gathering of people, I was going to head to and meet new people. And that was somewhat successful, but when I stopped and looked at a lot of the things that how it all pieced together, it really all pieced together from people that I already knew. And those were the people who brought me the most, and those were the people who really created success for me. If I stop and peel back, and I met this person from this person, this person from this person. There were two people I worked at, the firm I was at, Coopers & Lybrand, Al Cliffel and Frank Carino, who were two people, well, and Tom Zano's another one, that were very instrumental in me, reaching out and they introduced me to somebody and then introduced me to somebody else. Another person comes to mind is Bonnie Holbein, who I actually went to graduate business school with. That's where we had met, and then we had worked together at Coopers & Lybrand. Actually, she was, they were looking for people like her at Coopers when I was there, and so I tipped her off to it, and that's how she got that job. So the networking thing's just been around in my life forever, really. But it's something you need to stop and think about. Stop and look at all the people you already know. And it's good to meet new people. Don't get me wrong. There's certainly benefit in meeting new people. People are rolling out of our lives all the time. I can think of a few people in my networking spheres that have retired and moved away. Generally moved to Florida or the Carolinas or something like that, and they're just kind of out of circulation, and so they're not. I don't want to say they don't have the same networking value. They're not necessarily great to be reaching back out to, reconnecting with. But there are a lot of great people in my network that I can reach out to from time to time, and I'll share other stories as time goes on. But where's the beef in your network? The beef in your network is really the people you already know. That's the real power in your network. Yeah, meeting new people is great, but it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of momentum to build that relationship. And with the people you already know, well, you already know them. They already like you. They already trust you for the most part. They just kind of need to get caught up to speed on what it is that could help you. And that's where just having catch-up calls with people from time to time are really valuable. I can think of a few that I've had of late that have been, immensely valuable to me. Andrew Stotz, who's over in Thailand, he and I spoke back in December, and he just reached out to me a few weeks earlier and said, "Hey, let's just catch up." And it was nothing more than, "Hey, how's it going? What big wins did you have? What big win do you want for the year?" And we just kind of talked that through. And in that, "Hey, I think I have some opportunities for you. You're back on my radar, and he's back on my radar. I'm back on his radar." Same thing with Scott Mason in New York City. We just have a quick call. It's probably 6 months between calls, and just. What big wins do you have? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And so stop and think about the people you have in your network, and maybe pick 5 or 6 that, I'm just going to reach out and say, I'd love to have a catch-up call. I'd love to just touch base, see where you're at, No agenda. I'm not pushing an MLM. I'm not between things or any, I just want to catch up and see where things are at. And sometimes it's information. Sometimes it's a great insight that you didn't think about. It can be lots of different things, but that would be just a great thing to do, is just find those 5 or 6 people, reach out to them. And it may not all work out, but if some work out, something's going to come from that. And that's the beef in your network. It's the people you already know. So just try that and execute on that strategy and see what comes from it. I'd love to hear what comes from it. And if I'm somebody in your world that you need to catch up with, then certainly reach out, and we'll make the time.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.